Good morning everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Vector Continental 1:6 by 28mm first focal plane LPVO. This is a 34mm main tube LPVO. And before we get into the intro, I do want to say that they did send this optic out to me for free, so I did not pay a thing for this optic. And on top of that, there is also a discount code in the description down below that also doubles as an affiliate. So if you use my discount code, I make 7% off of anything that you purchase. Now, I don't need your money, as I have stated in many other videos. I don't want affiliate links to influence your buying habits. And again, it's not something that's important to me. If you don't want to use my discount code, use somebody else's discount code on the optic. I don't want that to influence your purchase decision. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and roll the intro.
Oh, we'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. We'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. We'd be alright if the wind was in our sails. And we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll. If we make it around the horn, we'd be alright. If we make it around the horn, we'd be alright. If we make it around the horn, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll
So real quickly, before we get into the Continental 1:6, if you want to help me out personally, you can of course like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and it does help me out quite a bit. On top of that, there's also Subscribestar, which is basically just a pro to a Patreon. You send me a couple bucks a month, you get entered in some giveaways. We will probably be giving away this optic on Subscribestar, so if you're interested in this optic, go ahead and check that out. And there's also my company, and we actually do have some uppers in stock. We have a few Mark 1s left, which is a 11.5/5.56 complete with BCG, and of course the Mark II as well, which is your standard 16-inch gun. We actually only have muzzle brakes left, but it's a free upgrade, so it shouldn't be anything to complain about. Again, a complete upper. Those are available on my website, so go ahead and check that out. So now let's go ahead and get into some of the features and the basic specifications basically about the Continental 1:6. And to be very clear up front, on paper this has a lot of features that for the price seem crazy, but this will be a bit of a mixed bag because the Continental line has a lot of different optics within it, mostly higher magnification stuff like 3:18, 4:24, so on and so forth. And sometimes when you downscale those features into a 1:6 or comparable LPVO, they don't quite scale as well. So something you can probably all tell just by looking at it is that this is a very, very big optic. So what we have is a optic body, 6061 T6 aluminum, very standard for the industry, that is almost 12 inches long, combined with a 34mm main tube. So this is a very thick main tube. It means that you get a very big, chunky optic. Now on the website, they claim that it is 19.5 ounces. I don't believe that is accurate. I believe it is north of 20 ounces. Now that combined with the scope mount that they sent out with this optic, which is basically a just huge chunk of aluminum. It's not a cantilever scope mount, which would be very nice, but we'll get into that later. But this scope mount, while it is very, very strong, it is also very heavy. So I believe that this setup, as you see it right now on a very heavy Bushmaster ACR, is probably north of 30 ounces, which is about 2 pounds on the top of your gun. Now, again, there are some very, very nice features, and there's some other things that kind of carry over from the Continental line that get put into this LPVO. Now, one of the nice things about the Continental line is that with all of them, you're going to be getting good glass and these very, very good turrets. Now, the turrets that are on here, do you really need them on a 1:6 LPVO? Probably not, but because it's married to the Continental line where they all have basically the same feature sets, though of course the other ones just have much different magnification levels, you're going to get these very, very nice turrets that are also feature packed. So First thing about the turrets is, of course, in the downward position, they are locked. You lift to adjust. And then this one here has a built-in zero stop. So I have this gun zeroed out with this zero stop. So if I rotate all the way back down to zero, that's a hard stop. It will not go any further than that. That is where I have the zero set to. I had it dialed up to 3.5 mils. I was shooting out to like 400 yards with this. And that's no problem. So anytime I want to go back to zero, you can literally do it in the dark. You don't even need to look at it. You just twist it until it stops and it is back to your zero stop. Now on top of that, I believe you have 52 mils of elevation, which is a lot of mils, more than you will probably ever use. So there's 100 clicks per rotation, 1/10 mil, because this is based in mils. If we go past the zero, you might notice this little knob pops up, and now I know that I'm 10 mils up. So I don't need to remember how many times I've turned it. I know that I'm at least 10 mils up at this point. So if I need to dial 10 plus mils for any given reason, although I probably would never again do that on this sort of gun with a BDC built into it, it is there. So again, it's kind of an odd feature set, but it is nice, but again, not necessarily something that you would need into 1:6. Now, the windage is very similar, very, very good clicks, very strong. They have audible, tactile, they feel very nice, a lot better than what you're going to get from other scopes within the same price point. Now, if we flip the scope over a little bit, it is also a illuminated reticle, of course, as is standard. We do have 6 different brightness settings. They are all sub daylight bright, so it doesn't really matter what daylight setting you have it on, but it will again work in dusk or low light conditions where you want that sort of illumination. Now it has an off setting in between, which is quite nice, though again, if it did get brighter, it would be more usable up close or on lower magnification, because we will talk about some issues that this has with this magnification range and this reticle in first focal plane. Now, the turrets on it are very, very nice. Like I mentioned, they have some very nice features built into them, but do you need them in a 1:6? You know, probably not. There could be some certain applications for certain people that would need those features in this sort of form factor and package, but for me, those are kind of just extra features that aren't really doing me anything other than adding more weight and complexity to an otherwise, you know, very simple 1:6 LPVO. Now, moving back from there, we do have, of course, our magnification ring, which is from 1:6. It has a very smooth 180-degree throw, and this optic at this point has been dropped twice, something that I do notice on other budget optics sometimes, depending on how you drop them, is the magnification ring will get very, very tight and stiff after you drop it a couple times. This one here is still very, very smooth. Back from there, we have a very nice smooth rear diopter that is actually did take the brunt of one of the drops and it kind of bent it down a little bit. Still working perfectly fine though, no issues. Now the diopter is not meant to adjust your field of view. It is meant to adjust the reticle to your eye. Some people have very poor vision, some people have very good vision. Currently, I have very, very good vision, so I don't really need to mess with it too much, but again, it's to adjust the reticle to your eyes, not to adjust the field of view or anything else. Now, getting into the field of view on the optic itself, it has a very, very generous 112.5 feet of field of view. That is very, very good. Anything that is above 100 I consider good or acceptable. Anything over 110 is excellent, so this would be in that excellent category. And then everything over 120 is phenomenal. And there is going to be a couple scopes coming up that I'm testing that have a field of view of over 120 feet at 1x. Now again, with an LPVO, that 1x field of view doesn't actually matter all that much because you're shooting with both eyes open. You can use your other eye to attain nearly 180 degrees of field of view, so it doesn't really matter how much is within the scope. The only time that it helps, and I personally like it, is when you're like transitioning from targets to targets within the scope versus having to look at the scope and then see the target over there, then adjust the scope to your eyes, and there's always a bit of a difference between what you see from the scope and what's actually there. But 112 feet of field of view is very, very good. And that of course translates when you turn up the magnification. So at 6x, proportionally, you have much higher field of view when you have that more zoomed in effect. So that is much more usable at long range versus if you have a very tight field of view on 1x, that's only going to get worse when you get into the higher magnification ranges. Now, all of that is very, very nice, but probably the standout feature for this optic is the claimed use of German Schott glass. Now, Schott glass, S-C-H-O-T-T, is widely regarded as the best optical glass in the world. And I have seen some optics use it in person. The ZCO, the 4-24 or 5-35 that I tested a few months ago, that $4,000 optic was using German Schott glass, and that glass was absolutely perfect. Now, I talked to Vector a little bit about how they're getting their German glass, and they actually own part stake in a German glass manufacturing company. I don't know if it's Schott. Obviously, I would assume that it would be Schott, but they didn't want to go into too much detail. But apparently, they do legitimately own a part stake in the German glass company. So, purportedly, some of this glass in here is German Schott glass. Now, the reason that I say purportedly is because I am not getting the anticipated level of optical quality. Now, I believe that this is probably a combination of German glass and Chinese glass. Chinese glass is still towards the lower end of the spectrum in terms of quality. Now, that being said, it has come a long, long ways in the past few years or so, and it is very good. Though, again, you're not going to be reaching the same levels of quality, crispness, brightness that you're going to be getting out of some different optical solutions. So, while on paper, again, you have a huge field of view, you have a German Schott glass, the optical quality is not quite to the level that I expected. And one thing that I did notice in very, very bright environments is that I was getting a lot of chromatic aberration. And what that basically is you'll have color shift. The brightest parts of your image will sometimes shift to like pink or purple or blue, again, depending on your eyes and some other factors going on. So while the glass is good and a step above, say, normal, just basic Chinese glass, I would warrant that it is not either not true German glass or it's not 100% German glass that is in here. They might be using a part German solution for the prescription, and then other filler elements are not German glass to kind of save money on that. So, while I do think it is a step up from your basic Chinese glass, do not expect the same level of quality that you're going to be getting when you spend $1,000, $2,000 on real fully German glass optics. So, with that being said, for the price point, it still has very good glass, though again, if you look at that marketing term of, oh, it's German Schott glass, it does not have that level of optical quality, at least to my eyes. Now, I know it's a little bit subjective, but something else about this glass is at the 1X, it is a little bit fish-eyed, so you do have a little bit of warping around the corners. It's not bad, and there are definitely worse LPVOs that I've seen at 1X, but still, honestly, to my eyes, the best LPVO for 1X flatness, field of view, and color, sharpness, all of that, for under $500 or around $500 is actually still the Vortex Viper PST Gen 2. That has great glass, great field of view, very crisp, perfect illumination, and about the same size and weight, honestly, as this, and about the same price point. Now, moving past that, we come to the next biggest issue on the Vector Continental 1-6, and that is the reticle design. Now, if you know me personally, in a 1-6X, I don't believe you really ever need first focal plane. First focal plane can help you when you're shooting at intermediate distances and you're not on either minimum or maximum magnification wherever your reticle is trued at. However, on a 5.56 gun really inside of 300 yards, there is no holdover. There's like 6 inches at 300 yards if you're using a 50-200-0. And then if you're beyond 300 yards, you're probably cranked up to max magnification. On a 1-8X, 1-10X, 1-12X, there's a lot higher likelihood that you're not going to be on max magnification, and therefore first focal plane makes a lot more sense. Now, first focal plane on a 1-6 can be perfectly fine if the reticle is designed properly. And this reticle that we have in here on 1X likes to play the game of where is the reticle. So I'll go ahead and start showing you inset footage of inside the optic. And at 1X, the reticle, again, because the reticle is not daylight bright, so if you're using it outdoors, you can't use the illumination to make up for the fact that the reticle is so small at 1X. The reticle is basically unseeable at 1X. It is very thin, it's very faint, it's not a good reference point whatsoever. So that for me really holds back an LPVO because, again, a low power variable optic to me needs to be good up close. because if I don't need it to be good up close, I'm going to be using a higher magnification scope, a 3 to 12, a 3 to 15, a 3 to 18, something like that to give me more range if I'm not concerned with the up close performance. However, a low power variable zoom optic needs to be good up close. Now, the reticle that they have in here is very good at the higher magnification ranges. Anywhere from 3 to 6, it is very, very usable. And again, I have taken this optic out to 500 yards, no issues whatsoever. And at the higher magnification ranges, it performs just fine. However, because of the design of the reticle and the low illumination, there's not really anything helping you out at 1x. It is still definitely usable, and you'll see me use it again up close, shooting very quickly, still hitting targets just as I would, but it's more difficult for me to do than basically any other optic on the market, just because that 1x reticle is very, very small, very faint. The illumination is not bright enough to show up in any sort of bright environments. So the 1x performance, while again not unusable, is just more difficult and less usable. So it's not something that would be a total turnoff if you were sold on everything else about this optic. But for me, that combined with some of the other things going on here means that this is a very, very mixed bag of an optic. You have very, very good glass for the price point, not necessarily the best glass for the price point, but very good glass for the price point. You have a 34mm main tube, its first focal plane, it has a very good field of view, but it's a huge, heavy optic with features you probably don't need. The 1x performance is not very good, combined with the very, very small, faint reticle at 1x and the little bit warping fisheye effect. So again, we've talked about how I'm not really a big fan of the reticle at 1x, and I think it does hinder or hold back the performance at 1x. Though again, the reticle does have a lot of nice things going for it at higher magnification. So we do have a BDC reticle, a ballistic drop calculation reticle, all the way out to 800 yards. Now, it is basically a one-to-one ripoff of the ACSS reticle, which is totally fine. ACSS makes a really good product. Dimitri over there might hate that everybody's ripping off his reticles, but they're doing it for a specific reason. So basically you have a center chevron that is very nice, a very, very fine point, even at higher magnifications. It's very, very usable at the higher magnifications. And you have an outer horseshoe. Now again, at 1x, that horseshoe and chevron are minuscule, barely even seeable in the glass whatsoever. But at 6x, they are very, very nice frames of references. You can use the center chevron to tell if somebody is 100 yards away or not by measuring their shoulders in it. And you also have a shoulder width drop within the BDC. So on a normal sized man, you could tell how far they were away from you if they were facing you perfectly, at least in theory. Now, I have not tested this out to 800 yards, but out to 500 yards, the BDC lines up just fine with the 16-inch or similar 5.56 gun. You're not really going to have any issues. Now, that again is nice. At 6x, the BDC works really well just because you can actually see it. You know, anywhere from 3 to 6x, the reticle is very, very usable. But again, because the low end performance is really held back because the reticle is not thick enough or bright enough to really draw your eye in and kind of aid you in picking up that reticle quickly and putting it exactly where you want it on lower magnification. While it does have a lot of things going for it at higher magnification, it still is again held back at lower magnification. Now, in terms of my testing on this optic, I believe I've had it on no less than 4 or 5 different guns, and I believe the round count is around 1,000 rounds, mostly 5.56, although some 7.62 by 39 as well. And like I do with all of my optics, or nearly all of my optic tests, I do a double drop test. So we start out with a 5-round control group at 50 yards. I believe I was using just SDI M193. Then we go ahead and do 2 shoulder height drops, one on the top of the optic, one on the side of the optic. And then we go ahead and do 5 more rounds. And again, with this mount torqued down to 40 inch-pounds on all 3 of the crossbolts, we experienced 0 shift in 0. So basically point of aim, point of impact did not change for either of the groups. They were basically perfectly identical. So in terms of the optics durability and the mount's ability to hold 0, very, very good, which is a nice thing to see, especially when you're spending, you know, $400, $500, $600 on an optic. You like to see that the optic will maintain 0 if it encounters a sharp impact. Not saying that you're going to drop your scope, sorry, but it could still experience a sharp impact. And again, during recoil, absolutely nothing. 5.56, 7.62 by 39 really shouldn't be doing anything to your optics. If it is, you probably have a serious issue somewhere within your optic. But overall, its performance at long range, mid range is perfectly acceptable, very good. The turrets are quite nice if you plan on dialing. Usually I just got it zeroed and then set or forget, or if I wanted to use the turrets versus the BDC, you can dial up and you have very, very nice turrets to do so. But again, this is kind of just a mixed bag of feature sets. The feature sets that are in here make a lot more sense when you take into account the entire Continental line of higher magnification scopes, a 3-18, a 4-24, again, so on and so forth. That makes a lot more sense. So I may try and get in one of their 34mm higher magnification scopes to test out to see if these features gel a lot better in some of their higher magnification scopes. But on the 1:6 in Continental, it's kind of a miss for me. So overall, I don't really recommend this scope unless there's somebody out there who this feature set really screams that they need this immediately. I would kind of hold off on buying this one specifically. The other Continentals, again, for the money, could be very, very good, very high quality scopes. I just haven't had any time with them whatsoever, though again, I will try to, if they still talk to me after this video, of course. Now, something else that I did want to mention is that I don't just want to trash on products and say that I dislike them. I do want to actually help the manufacturer make a better product. So I will be talking with them about the improvements that they can make to specifically the 1:6 model to make it a little bit more usable for the average person, changing up the reticle a little bit and probably removing the exposed turrets altogether, making it a little bit simpler, a little bit lighter, hopefully a little bit cheaper as well, and kind of fixing some of the other stuff going on here. Now, overall on this optic, it is, again, just a very mixed bag of some very, very good things going on and some not so good things going on. I don't think that it really makes sense for a 1:6 LPVO. If you just read about it on paper, you might be very, very impressed with it. You'd think it's a great field of view, lightweight, German glass, first focal plane, and you're gonna say, wow, this is definitely the best optic within this price point. However, that is just not the case, and while it might seem very good on paper, in the real world, this is definitely held back in a lot of areas. So again, I will be talking with Vector. Hopefully they're not too upset at me, and I will, try to actually improve the product a little bit so that there is maybe a Gen 2 version or another version coming down the road that is a little bit better and a little bit more usable for most people. So that's about it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and let me know down below what you guys think of the Vector Continental 1:6 or any other LPVOs that I should be checking out. There are going to be some more LPVOs videos coming up here on the channel. So with all that out of the way, thank you guys once again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace off.